Hi everyone, Steve Patterson here from PhotoshopEssentials.com. In this video, we'll learn how to easily change eye color in Photoshop using a hue saturation adjustment layer. Whether you know which color you want to use or you just want to play around and experiment, a hue saturation adjustment layer makes changing eye color easy, fast, and fun. And because we'll be working with an adjustment layer, we won't be making any permanent changes to the image. You'll still have your original unedited version with the original eye color even after we're done. As always, I'll explain every step as we go so you can easily follow along no matter what your current skill level. If you're watching this video on our website, you also have access to the text version, so you can watch the video or read through the steps anytime you like. Thanks for joining me, and let's get started. So before we begin, let's make it easier to see what we're doing by zooming in on the eyes. To do that, select Photoshop's Zoom tool from the toolbar. Then, click a few times in the area between the eyes to zoom in. If you zoom in too far, hold down the Alt key on your keyboard on a Windows PC, or on a Mac, press and hold the Option key, and then click to zoom back out. To reposition the image on the screen after you've zoomed in, press and hold the space bar on your keyboard. That will temporarily switch you to Photoshop's Hand tool. Click on the image with the Hand tool and just drag it into position. Now, we want to change the eye color without affecting the rest of the image, which means we need to select the eyes. To do that, we can use Photoshop's Lasso tool. I'll select the Lasso tool from the toolbar. Then, all we need to do is draw a rough selection around each eye. Now, we don't need the entire eye, we only need the iris, the colored area in each eye. And we don't need to worry about making a precise selection at this point. We only need a rough selection because we can come back later and clean the area up. So for now, I'll just click and draw a rough selection outline around the eye or around the iris, like so. Again, I'm not being precise here because we can come back later and clean this area up. Once you have the first eye selected, press and hold the Shift key on your keyboard. With the Shift key held down, you'll see a small plus sign in the lower right of your mouse cursor. Pressing the Shift key tells Photoshop to add the selection you're about to draw to the selection you've already drawn. So with the Shift key held down, I'll click and draw another selection, this time around the other eye or the other iris. Again, I'm not being precise here because we can come back later and clean this area up. Now that we have both eyes selected, we can easily change their color. For that, we'll use a hue saturation adjustment layer. I'll click on my panel group and drag it out into the center so we can better see what I'm doing. To add a hue saturation adjustment layer, click on the New Fill or Adjustment Layer icon at the bottom of the Layers panel. Then choose Hue Saturation from the list. Photoshop adds a hue saturation adjustment layer above the image, and the controls and options for the hue saturation adjustment layer appear in Photoshop's Properties panel. Again, I'll click and drag the Properties panel out into the center so we can better see what I'm doing. To change the eye color, we want to colorize the eyes. So in the Properties panel, click on the Colorize option. As soon as you select Colorize, the person's eyes will turn red. Now, red is probably not the color you're going for, so let's learn how to change it. To change the eye color, all we need to do is drag the Hue slider in the Properties panel. Hue is what most people think of as the actual color itself, and dragging the slider from left to right cycles through all of the colors of the rainbow, from oranges and yellows to greens, cyans, blues, magentas, and finally back to red over on the right. You'll see the color of the eyes changing as you drag the slider. I'm going to set my hue value to around 200 for a nice blue. But of course, you can choose whichever color you like. Once you've chosen your main color, chances are the color will be too intense. To reduce the intensity, drag the saturation slider towards the left to lower the intensity of the color until things start to look more natural. A value of usually between 10 and 15 works well. I'm going to drag my Properties panel out of the way here, and I'll move my Layers panel back up. And if we look in the Layers panel, we see our Hue Saturation adjustment layer sitting above the image. Now at the moment, the adjustment layer's blend mode is set to normal, which means that our Hue Saturation adjustment layer is affecting not only the color of the eyes, but also their brightness. We want to change only the color, not the brightness, so change the blend mode from normal to color. Now the difference can be subtle, but you should see more of the original detail in the eyes after switching to the color blend mode. In my case, the eyes now appear a bit brighter than they did when the blend mode was set to normal. I'll switch back to normal for a second just so we can see what they looked like originally, and then I'll switch back to color. And we can see that they do look a bit brighter with the color blend mode. So one of the nice features of adjustment layers in Photoshop is that they include a built-in layer mask, and we've been using the layer mask ever since we added the Hue Saturation adjustment layer. Photoshop used our initial lasso tool selection around the eyes to create the mask for us. And we can see the layer mask thumbnail here in the Layers panel. Notice that the layer mask thumbnail is filled mostly with black, with only two little tiny areas of white. Black on the layer mask represents the areas of our image where the Hue Saturation adjustment layer is having no effect. In other words, those are the areas that are still showing their original color. The two small white areas are the selections we made around the eyes with the lasso tool, and those are the only areas in the image that are being colorized by the adjustment layer. Now chances are the selection you made with the lasso tool wasn't perfect, and mine certainly wasn't. And we can see in my case that some of the blue is extending not only into the white part of the eyes, but also into the eyelids on the top and bottom. And we can see that happening in both eyes. We need to clean those areas up, and we can do that easily just by painting over them on the layer mask. Any area where we paint with black on the mask is going to hide the effects of the adjustment layer. If we paint on the layer mask with white, any areas we paint over with white will show the effects of the adjustment layer. So any areas that we paint with black are going to hide the coloring effect, and any areas that we paint over with white will show the coloring effect. To paint on the mask, select Photoshop's Brush tool from the toolbar. Now to clean up the area around the eyes, we need to paint on the mask with black, which means we need to have our foreground color set to black, because Photoshop uses the foreground color as the color of the brush. We can see our current foreground and background colors in the color swatches near the bottom of the toolbar. By default, your foreground color will be set to white, and your background color will be set to black. To swap the colors, press the letter X on your keyboard, and that sets your foreground color to black. Then, with the brush tool selected and black as your foreground color, simply paint around the iris in each eye to clean up any problem areas. Now you'll want to use a small soft edge brush. You can change the size of your brush from the keyboard. Press the left bracket key to make the brush smaller every time you press it, or press the right bracket key to make the brush larger. We're also going to want to paint with a very soft edge brush. So on a Windows PC, right-click anywhere in the image. On a Mac, press and hold the Control key and click. This opens Photoshop's Brush Preset Picker. Lower the hardness of your brush all the way to 0%. That will give us a very soft edge brush and create smooth transitions between the eye and the area where we're painting. To close out of the Brush Preset Picker, on a Windows PC, press the Enter key on your keyboard, and on a Mac, press the Return key. Then, simply move your brush cursor to the outside of the iris and click and begin painting to hide the effects of the adjustment layer. Because we're painting on a layer mask, not on the image itself, we don't see the color of our brush as we paint. Instead, we simply hide the effects of the adjustment layer. If you make a mistake and paint over the iris, just press the letter X on your keyboard to swap your foreground and background colors so that your foreground color is white. Then, paint over the iris to bring back the coloring effect. When you're done, press the letter X again to set your foreground color back to black and continue cleaning up the area around the eye. We also want to hide the effect from the pupil in the center, so I'll just click and paint inside that area to hide the adjustment layer. Now that I've cleaned up the first eye, I'll drag my mouse cursor over to the second eye, and I'll click and begin painting to clean up that area as well. Again, if you make a mistake, just press the letter X to set your foreground color to white, paint over the iris to bring back the coloring effect, and then press the letter X again to set your foreground color to black, and continue painting to clean up the area. And I'll click inside the pupil there and clean up that area as well. And there we go. I've cleaned up the area around both eyes. To see what the eyes looked like before changing the color, click on the visibility icon for the hue saturation adjustment layer. That will temporarily turn the adjustment layer off so we can see what the eye color looked like originally. Click the same empty box again to turn the adjustment layer back on and view the colorizing effect. At this point, if you want to change the eye color again, just go back to the Properties panel and drag the hue slider to a different color. This time I think I'll choose a green. Then you can adjust the saturation slider to increase or decrease the saturation of the color. Or if I don't like the green, maybe I'll try something a bit different and give her magenta eyes. There we go, that looks pretty good. And maybe I'll just increase the saturation value a little bit just to create something that looks extremely natural. And there we have it. That's how to easily change eye color in Photoshop using a hue saturation adjustment layer. I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you learned something along the way, and I hope to see you next time. I'm Steve Patterson from PhotoshopEssentials.com.